Presently, the noise opened up again, as though Satan and a regiment of imps were coming forth for battle. You guys, that's an actual, direct quote from a 1903 newspaper. It was describing something so completely terrifying that it caused an entire peaceful farming town to literally grab their guns in the dead of night. Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, so today we're diving into this completely bizarre 1903 legend. We're talking about a small town in Iowa, a monster with a glowing horn, and a century-old mystery that just refused to stay buried. We are unpacking the incredibly wild legend of the Van Meter visitor. Section 1. 5 Nights of Terror. So picture this. You're living in the quiet, sleepy farming town of Van Meter, Iowa, and it's the fall of 1903. Everything's perfectly peaceful, right? Well, until a frantic 5-day timeline of pure terror kicks off. Let's see how this builds. It all started on September 29th, when a local businessman named Eugene Griffith spotted this strange light hopping across the rooftops. The very next night, Dr. Fred Alcott is jolted awake, comes face to face with a terrifying creature, and actually fires 5 point-blank shots at it. By October 1st, a bank teller named Clarence Dunn gets so spooked he thinks it's a robbery, so he blasts a shotgun right through the bank window at the entity. And finally, on October 2nd and 3rd, the whole town gathers for a desperate ambush at an abandoned coal mine. The encounters just escalated so rapidly. And keep in mind, these weren't just random people making things up. These were respected professionals, doctors and bankers. And according to the original reports, whatever they were shooting at wasn't just some big bird. They described an 8-foot-tall, bipedal monster with massive, bat-like wings. But okay, the absolute craziest feature? It supposedly had a single, blunt horn on its forehead that shot out a blinding, high-intensity spotlight. Witnesses also claimed it moved with this terrifying supernatural speed, literally bounding around like a kangaroo, all while giving off a stupefying, incredibly foul odor. Oh, and perhaps most terrifying of all, it seemed totally, 100% immune to the heavy gunfire the townsfolk were just unloading on it. Which brings us to Section 2, Showdown at the Coal Mine. After days of living in just absolute sheer terror, the people of Van Meter decided they'd had enough. And really, the crucial point here is the physical evidence left behind. That bank teller, Clarence Dunn, actually found massive 3-toed tracks left outside the window he'd shot out. He even went so far as to make plaster casts of them. Plus, there was that lingering, noxious stench hanging in the air, and miners reported hearing horrifying, straight-up demonic noises echoing from the dark depths of an abandoned coal mine at the edge of town. It really seemed like this old mine was the creature's home base. So this all leads to a massive cinematic climax. Step 1. A posse of armed citizens, led by the local brick plant foreman J.L. Platt Jr., decides to stake out the coal mine in those pitch-black, early hours right before dawn. Step 2. To their absolute horror, not one, but 2 creatures emerge from the shaft. One's massive, one's smaller, but they both have those blinding, glowing horns. Step 3. The crowd unleashes a massive barrage of gunfire. One paper literally wrote, "The reception they received would have sunk the Spanish fleet." Yet the bullets failed completely. The creatures were totally unfazed and just slowly retreated back into the dark depths. So Step 4. The terrified townsfolk resorted to barricading the mine entrance, sealing the monsters shut underground forever. And they were supposedly never seen again. Honestly, it's an incredibly chilling story. But before we start asking what it was, we really need to invoke Ray Hyman's categorical imperative, which basically says, do not try to explain something until you are absolutely sure it actually happened. So, did any of this actually happen? To answer that, we've got to snap out of the spooky campfire vibe and apply some real critical thinking here. Section 3. Investigating the 1903 claims. When skeptical investigators finally started digging into the original source material, they found that the truth usually hides right in the shadows of the headlines. Just days after this super dramatic story ran in the Des Moines Daily News, the actual residents of Van Meter pushed back hard. They wrote these indignant letters to a rival paper, the Des Moines Daily Capital, to expose the whole thing. They straight up called the story a pure fabrication and the height of foolishness manufactured for the news. They even revealed that the newspaper editors had just spun the yarn out of a really minor incident or two, and they specifically called out a local guy named Harry H. Phillips as the author of the hoax. Now, what's really fascinating here is how it proves the story was manipulated. When you compare the original October 4th article with a reprint that ran in the St. Paul Globe a week later, the editing is so obvious. The original used super colorful, exaggerated language, calling it half human and half animal with great bat-like wings. But the reprint completely stripped away the emotion. It just dryly stated, "The monster emerged from the shaft. A score of shots were fired." By editing it into this dry, journalistic tone, those editors gave a totally wild piece of fiction the illusion of real, credible reporting. And that's exactly how the hoax spread so far beyond Iowa. We also really have to remember the context of the era here. Between the 1860s and the 1900s, American newspapers were constantly publishing American dragon sightings. These were basically tall tales of flying serpents and winged reptiles out on the wild frontier. Plus, just a few years before this, in 1896 and 1897, the press was absolutely saturated with the mysterious airship wave, feeding readers all sorts of fantastical stories about flying machines. The newspaper ecosystem in 1903 was already completely primed to profit from these incredible, otherworldly tall tales. And honestly, they had very little regard for what we'd consider modern journalistic skepticism today. Section 4. Biological Impossibilities. So if the historical evidence strongly points to a hoax, what does science have to say about the creature itself? Well, let's just look at that bioluminescent horn. While brief little flashes of light definitely exist in nature, fireflies or some deep-sea fish, a sustained, high-intensity biological spotlight that's capable of actually blinding a person, there is absolutely no precedent for that in nature. It's quite literally a biological impossibility. And this brilliantly illustrates why it's a myth. The creature's basic anatomy is totally flawed. Large terrestrial animals on Earth are tetrapods, meaning they're four-limbed vertebrates. Birds and bats can fly because their forelimbs evolved into wings over millions of years. But the Van Meter visitor was specifically described as having 4 functional legs so it could jump like a kangaroo, plus 2 massive bat-like wings on top of that. That would make it a hexapod, a 6-limbed animal. For a vertebrate to have 6 limbs, you'd need an entirely separate evolutionary lineage, and that simply does not exist anywhere in the vertebrate fossil record. It completely defies Earth's biology. Section 5. The Modern Visitor Festival. But here's the fun part. Despite being totally debunked by science and literally exposed as a hoax by the very town it supposedly terrorized, the legend didn't die. I mean, it did go completely dormant for about 110 years. It was barely even a historical footnote until 2013. That's when researchers Chad Lewis, Noah Voss, and Kevin Lee Nelson published a book compiling all those old newspaper clippings. And just like that, the Van Meter visitor was brought back to life for the internet age. And today, the town of Van Meter has completely embraced their very own unique monster lore. Since 2013, they've been hosting an annual Van Meter Visitor Festival every single September. They do haunted walking tours of the old coal mine and the historic bank building. They host big vendor fairs, and they even bring in guest speakers to talk all about cryptids, the paranormal, and local history. It's just turned into this really huge, fun tourist draw for the whole community. Chad Lewis, one of the authors who helped revive the story, summed it up perfectly. He noted, "A lot of people don't necessarily believe in it. They want an adventure." And I think that hits the nail on the head. The festival is way less about genuine belief in some impossible 6-limbed monster and much more about community, curiosity, and just the simple thrill of the hunt, especially when there's a good, spooky legend floating around in the crisp autumn air. Which kind of leaves us with this final thought. A total hoax from 1903, built entirely on newspaper sensationalism and biological absurdities, has successfully transformed into a really beloved modern tradition. It makes you wonder, what do you think really lurks in the shadows? Or maybe the better question is, why do we all love a good scare so much? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, guys. Until next time, keep questioning what you see in the dark.